right, Kyle. So we had a big series in the National League between the Atlanta Braves, who are on a hot streak, against the Los Angeles Dodgers. But the most interesting thing was not the product on the field. It actually came from off the field, as Freddie Freeman, longtime Atlanta Brave, homecoming for him, fired his agent after offseason, where he signed a 6-year deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Los Angeles Dodgers that won 106 games last year and are currently first place in the National League West. But we get some more details coming in. So source Doug Gottlieb, so Casey Close, former agent of Freddie Freeman, never told Freeman about the Braves' final offer. Now, the theory there is the Braves offered a contract at a lesser amount, but Freddie Freeman had more of a priority to stay in Atlanta. And with him not knowing of this contract, he ended up opting to sign with the Dodgers after the Braves eventually went on to trade for and acquire Matt Olson to fill their first base need. My question to you, do you have any sympathy for Freeman in this scenario?
Yes, I have sympathy for Freddie Freeman because ultimately the agent is supposed to work for the player. And if the agent was working in the interest of getting the biggest contract possible in that situation and didn't tell Freddie the final offer, then that's not working for the priority of Freddie Freeman.
It's a betrayal of trust to me.
It goes against what he was hired to do in the first place if he knew that Freddie Freeman would have taken the lesser offer to prioritize staying in Atlanta. So in that case, absolutely. If Freddie Freeman didn't have all the information, I feel sympathy in that respect for him. I did say last week on a segment that I think aired a little later that Dodgers aren't too happy with each other, and there's just not a lot of fun going on in that locker room, and not just with Freddie Freeman, but also to Mookie Betts and company.
I don't know if you saw the image specifically, they got a little bit trending. So this also extends off of a press conference in which Freddie Freeman was in tears. He was shaken by his homecoming, like I mentioned, to Atlanta. The fans gave him an emotional outcry. There's a lot of love there in that relationship between the fans and Freddie Freeman. We've seen a lot of instances when a player has played for a long time with a team, wins a World Series and departs. And luckily for Freeman, it was a more mutual separation. Even though we're finding out now, again, with this situation, it might not have been as mutual as we thought. It might have been like something that he wanted to have happen. He wanted to stay in Atlanta and he wanted to continue to perform for that franchise. And those fans, I'm sure he had a lot of close relationships in that area. And, players, here's the big problem I have with this. Here's the big problem I have with the agent. It's one thing to get the money. And I know anyone who would turn down an extra $15 million never made $15 million. But at the same time, when you're already making that insane amount of money, when we're talking about he could have made $140 million estimated with the Braves, is the $160 million deal that much of a difference for you, especially when you love the area, when you love the fans, when you love where your daughter goes to school, your son goes to school, where your next door neighbors? That's the type of stuff that I think a guy like Freeman and a guy like a lot of players, I'm sure there's a lot of times in which this happens too, that we really don't know about. I'm sure there's a lot of agents that maybe kind of casually brush a lesser deal under the table in the interest of pursuing the highest value contract for their player. I feel like a guy like Scott Boras has probably done this a ton. I mean, not to put that out there into the ether, but a guy who's at the top of the game, like a Scott Boras, who has been making money year after year after year with some of the highest level players in the league. I'm sure he's probably taken the higher value contract for the player in lieu of what's best interest for that player, because, this sounds like just a dirty situation. And it's a right move for Freddie Freeman to fire Casey Close if he did betray his trust. I think that is the biggest takeaway I have. This is the right move because you can't trust this guy. What happens 6 years from now when you're negotiating your next contract? Is he just going to pursue the biggest contract available, or is he going to do what's right for you, Freddie Freeman?
And the damage is done at this point. If Freddie Freeman had the value of what value do I place on staying versus going? That was kind of the conversation this weekend. The detail that was kind of crazy to me was Freddie didn't know the final offer until he talked to his old, people with the Braves organization this weekend. He still didn't know that was the final offer on the table. And, this is the argument that can be made for just hiring a lawyer to hash out the details and negotiating a contract yourself, especially when you kind of know what the market is for a star like Freddie Freeman.
Well, I don't want to bury all agents. I'm sure that there are some that really do work for the best interest of their client. I'm just saying that I'm sure there's some of this underhanded dealings out there. And I'm sure there's some agents that do just get bright eyes with the dollar signs in their eyes whenever these contracts are pushed across the table. And especially moving to Los Angeles, there's a lot of people that would like look at that and say like, wow, you're moving from Atlanta to Los Angeles. That should be an upgrade right there. But it's not about that sometimes, like when you're moving across the country, when you're taking your family across the country, there's a lot of different value systems. There's a lot of financial implications. There's a lot of more things that go into making that type of move. I've oftentimes in my career, like asked, could I move to like a bigger city, like in New York or Los Angeles? I know I'm qualified for some jobs out there, but in a way it'd be like, well, that would be kind of like overturning my life. I feel like that's what kind of happened to Freddie Freeman right here. And like you said, the damage is done. Like, what's the next move for Freddie Freeman? I mean, he just has to play out the 6-year deal. And there's worse situations you could end up with because the Dodgers, as I mentioned, are first place in the National League West. They're probably going to be a World Series favorite again this year. And you look at the relationships with his teammates. Now, that's the biggest concern about when you hear about all these details getting leaked out there. Clayton Kershaw's saying, I hope we're not playing second fiddle to any other teams. We've seen like relationships in locker rooms devolve over stuff like that. You look at what happened for your San Diego Padres last year when those relationships started to deteriorate, and that ruined the team in that second half of the season. Now, granted, I am a Giants fan, and I would root for the downfall of the Los Angeles Dodgers, but not in the interest of a man's mental state, in Freddie Freeman's case, his mental state deteriorating as well.
I think the Dodgers are an interesting point of this because it's what's left now that everything else has been hashed out over the offseason and the contracts are in place. This is combined with the fact that Mookie Betts has basically went on a podcast and was like, I wish I was making the money in Los Angeles, but playing with the Boston Red Sox. And that was ultimately the decision he had to make in his way out the door. So I think that's interesting. And what the Dodgers have now is they've spent so much money relative to their competition that they will buy themselves 100 wins every single season. At the very end of the road, the margins get to be more thin than that, especially last year where like Buehler gets hurt, Scherzer gets hurt, Muncy gets hurt, boom, you lose to the Braves when you were favored at the start of the series and you lose in 6 games. And, the margins can be thin towards the end of the season. So that part's interesting from a Dodgers standpoint. I'm fascinated to see what they do with whatever the team is constructed as such now, because as I said last week with my exclusive insider information, that the Dodgers are not really having fun. They're just a bunch of mercenaries, and not all of them are mercenaries, but a lot of them feel like mercenaries brought together to just kind of play an individual sport, and baseball is uniquely an individual sport. So I think that's going to be interesting from how it plays out, especially because Kershaw said other nicer things after the fact, but the headline grabbing line was, I hope we're not second fiddle, or we hope we're not second choice for Freddie
Freeman. Even came out with a little bit of a statement too, to kind of say, I am here for 6 years. I'm locked in for this 6 years. So he's even trying to walk back his previous statements as well, or he's remedied this, because Freddie Freeman is such a high character guy that I don't think he wants this situation to implode on itself either. Mm-hmm. I think he's just feeling himself, a little bit. I think he's just a little bit down in the dumps, and that makes sense. Hey, you move away from home. That is a big adjustment. That takes a lot of adjusting for someone. I've moved away from home. I've moved a couple states in my career, and that's a hard thing to do. That is. So I could only imagine moving again across the country and having to play for a team that maybe you're not that interested in playing with, but while you're there, you're going to be a professional. You're still going to hit 300. You're still going to hit 30 home runs. You're still going to steal over double-digit bases. He's still going to do all the right things to help the Dodgers win. But, it does kind of like fracture that locker room just a little bit. Anyway, guys, let us know what you think of the Freddie Freeman situation in the comments. Was it the right move to fire his agent? How do you think about his agent's dealings? We kind of want to know your thoughts. Leave a like on this video. And of course, hit that subscribe button. Anyway, from Juju Talk Sports, I got a little better. We'll see you next time.